This is the Fantasy Ladder Podcast, episode 38. I'm your host, Steve, at Fantasy Ladder. This podcast is brought to you by the IDP Guys Network. So, welcome back once again, my fantasy football friends and family. Let's climb the ladder of fantasy football together. So, welcome to week 14 of NFL action. This is either the last game of the regular season for your fantasy league, or unfortunately, the first week of your fantasy football league playoffs. I say unfortunately because there are six teams on bye. Absolutely brutal. But that's what the NFL gets for adding an extra week of the regular season. Just throws the bye weeks into a little bit of a different rhythm than typical. Really can jack things up for the fantasy season. So hopefully your commissioner was proactive in adjusting that. But either way, we will run through the teams that are on bye here quickly. Got the Atlanta Falcons, the Chicago Bears, the Green Bay Packers, the Indianapolis Colts, the New Orleans Saints, and the Washington Commanders. So a pretty tough blow for your teams that are trying to either fight for playoff position or get through this first round here. Um, Leaving us with about 25 or so players that are reliable in a super flex league. Okay, so definitely a devastating loss. A lot of talent there, most notably Jonathan Taylor, Justin Fields, Christian Watson, amongst others that we will not have at our disposal for this week. So the flow of the show is going to start by covering the matchups of the week for the primetime games. I'm going to knock out some listener start sit questions that were submitted and then go through the early slate of Sunday games, then close it off with the later slate of Sunday games. So we will begin with Thursday night football, the Las Vegas Raiders at the Los Angeles Rams. This has an over under of 43 and a half. So in this one, I'm starting all my Raiders as long as they're healthy. More specifically, though, I've got the core four of Derek Carr, Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, of course, and Foster Moreau. Anyone beyond them, it would have to be a pretty deep league for me to consider playing them on the Thursday night game. On the Los Angeles Rams side of the ball, outside of Tyler Higbee, no one that I feel supremely confident in. I think Cam Akers will come in here as more of an if you must running back option. He is someone you may need to be relying on here with all the teams on bye, encouraged by the touchdowns from week 13, even though he had been pretty inefficient and pretty stagnant at less than 10 carries a game the last several weeks. But still would be a good opportunity to have an eye on Kyron Williams. Don't really want to get him in a starting lineup. At this point, I just want to kind of see how it goes because the quarterback situation is still pretty shaky there. Baker Mayfield, of course, was claimed by the Rams after he was released by the Panthers. So, kind of an interesting situation there. I would be shocked if he starts this one. It's likely going to be John Walford. So, outside of Tyler Higbee, a lot of the pass catching options I just would not want to rely on in this one. Although in deeper leagues, perhaps Van Jefferson outside of him, probably just for the best to avoid the Rams in this one. Sunday Night Football, we should have a much better matchup overall. The Miami Dolphins at the Los Angeles Chargers with a very nice 51 and a half over under implied for the game. So it should be a high scoring affair there. On the basically anyone who's healthy in this game, I would lean as a trust or as an if you must. The only really questionable one here on the Chargers is Mike Williams, just because he may be returning from being out for a handful of weeks here. So if he is back, it just might not be at full strength. So it's just kind of an annoying situation, especially waiting for Sunday night to make that decision. However, everyone else in that passing attack, most notably Keenan Allen, Josh Palmer, and Gerald Everett, you can still confidently have in your lineups if he's in or out of if Mike Williams is in or out of the lineup. Of course, you're starting Justin Herbert and Austin Eckler, the running back, of course. On the Miami Dolphins side of the ball, I will still be confidently starting Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle as long as he's healthy, and Tua Tagovailoa. As far as the running backs are concerned, still a split there between Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson. I would probably would I would generally speaking wouldn't love to have either one in my lineup, but both of them will come in as an if you must for this one, mostly because of the bye week situation. And then Monday Night Football, we got the New England Patriots at the Arizona Cardinals with a 44 and a half over under in this one. New England side of the ball, uh, really the only player that I can supremely trust is Ramondre Stevenson. Got to keep your eye on Damian Harris. He is currently questionable at this point, and if you are needing to rely on him, I would try to look a different direction just because he is questionable and you might not even know if he's active up until like, Monday early evening or something like that. So that's just going to be a real mess to deal with. As far as the other pieces of the offense, Mac Jones, I think, can be implemented here as a super flex option. I think Hunter Henry could be implemented as a deeper tight end play, and then the pass catchers, I think you can trust Jacoby Myers as a flex option. But anyone behind Jacoby Myers, it's just kind of like random. Devontae Parker could go off, or Nelson Aguilar could go off. Don't really want to rely on starting any of them. So outside of Ramondre Stevenson, Mac Jones in a deeper league, Hunter Henry in a deeper league, and Jacoby Myers as a flex, those would be the guys to focus on. On the Arizona Cardinals side of the ball, a little bit more intriguing here, despite the toughest matchup against the Patriots defense. I would be very confident still starting Kyler Murray, James Conner, DeAndre Hopkins, of course, and Hollywood Brown, Trey McBride, kind of an interesting player to keep your eye on, but I would not feel confident starting him on Monday night if I could help it, despite the tight end landscape just being kind of gross. He just has not been very involved in the offense. Another player to keep an eye out for, the pass catcher, Rondale Moore. He should be back this week. He is currently questionable. So again, just another one of these headaches, just because it's all the way until Monday. We might not know his availability. So just keep your eye on Rondale Moore. If he is active, he is likely to be an if you must wide receiver option, preferably for a deeper league with like multiple flex spots. Be interesting to see how Hopkins, Brown, and Moore all fit into the passing game once they're all on the field together. I'm not sure if they've had the opportunity, all three of them, to be on the field together. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So that'll do it for the primetime games. We will now go over some listener start sit questions. So if you follow me on Twitter at Fantasy Ladder, every Wednesday I put out a tweet asking if there's any start sit questions you have, or a lot of the time just like general strategy questions will come out of that as well. So I'm going to go through all the questions that were presented to me and give my best answers for how I would approach these start sit decisions. So I'm going to start things off with at Triathlete Chef. He asks, of course, Dak Prescott or Tua Tagovailoa. Dak is going up against the Houston Texans, and Tua is going up against the LA Chargers, as I mentioned before. In this one, I want to go with Tua, just trying to get in on the high game point total for the week. Actually tied at 51 and a half points with Minnesota at Detroit. Both of those should be pretty high scoring affairs. So give me Tua there. I just basically think the Cowboys against the Texans is just going to be a lot of Ezekiel Elliott, a lot of Tony Pollard. I don't think they're going to have to rely on Dak as much to be pushing the ball down the field. So I'll kind of fade Dak in this one. Um, Still not a bad option, but just would definitely prefer Tua for the scoring potential in that one. He also asks a DST question. I do enjoy these. Tennessee Titans going up against the Jaguars, the Raiders going up against the Rams, as we discussed on Thursday Night Football, and the Bengals against the Cleveland Browns. Um, Bengals, I may eliminate here. It is tempting, just because the Browns' offense wasn't that great, to be honest, against the Texans. Although all of the damage that was done was basically with the Browns' defense and their special teams. So I think it'll be a much better opportunity for the Browns' offense to see what they're made of, against a higher powered offense against Cincinnati. So I will avoid the Bengals defense there. Pretty tough call between the Raiders against the Rams, which should be a pretty juicy matchup for the Raiders, just with a very much a lesser than version of the Rams offense. Although it is the Raiders, so you're gonna have to really rely on sacks from like Max Crosby. Um, Hopefully that'll turn into turnovers, maybe get lucky with like a defensive touchdown there. But I think overall the more solid bet is the Tennessee Titans. Of course, they just came off of the pretty brutal loss against the Philadelphia Eagles. So brutal that their GM was fired, after AJ Brown, of course, who they traded away to the Eagles on draft night, just absolutely tore them apart. So sad to see that happen, but it's life in the NFL. But in this one, I think the Titans bounce back against the Jaguars at home. I would go with the Titans against the Jaguars, in a pretty critical, must win game, I would say, for the Titans going up against a division opponent. I'll take the Titans against the Jaguars rather than the Raiders against the Rams, even though on paper it looks really good. I kind of want to avoid that, but it is kind of a tough call. I can definitely see the appeal there with the Raiders. Just would think the Titans would be an overall better bet, especially with Trevor Lawrence being currently questionable right now. That's the way I would go. He asks another two-part question, asking about a running back between Donta Foreman or Travis Etienne. Foreman is going up against Seattle, although he is currently questionable, unsure if he'll play at this point. So you have a couple of days here to see how his availability is. Good matchup against Seattle, and then Travis Etienne going up against the Titans. As I just discussed, I would still go with Travis Etienne here, in general. But also, especially in this one, if Foreman can't go, I think ETN is still getting enough carries, enough opportunities and catches and things like this that he can still be fantasy relevant, even though I think overall the Tennessee defense will be a strong play as far as DST goes. So give me Travis Etienne between the two, but just keep your eye on Foreman and his availability throughout the week. Then he asks to pick two between Marquise Brown against the New England Patriots, Darius Slayton against the Eagles, or George Pickens against the Ravens. So we've been going back and forth about Slayton and Pickens. Typically, I'm going Pickens all day long. However, it has just become a pretty frustrating thing. And Darius Slayton, you just really can't deny his involvement in the Giants' offense for what that's worth. But I think another point of distinction that can be made here is the applied game totals. So the Eagles and the Giants is the over under is at 45, and the Ravens and Steelers is at 37. So should be anticipating a little bit more scoring on in the Eagles and Giants game, especially if the Giants are trailing against a high-powered Eagles offense, so that could equate to more passing volume for Slayton. So I'll take the chance on Slayton here, just kind of keep up with his pretty impressive and consistent involvement in that Giants offense. So I'd be going with Darius Slayton and Hollywood Brown against New England. So I will be benching Pickens amongst those three. So best of luck to you. And we have at NC Glock, of course, Nate, another member of the community. If you know, you know. Appreciate you asking the question, Nate. And go Penn State. We got the Rose Bowl, baby. So hopefully Penn State finds a way to not embarrass the state of Pennsylvania. But we will see how that goes, of course, in early January. He asks a quarterback superflex question. Pick two of the three quarterbacks: Russell Wilson against the Chiefs, Mike White against the Buffalo Bills, and Daniel Jones against the Philadelphia Eagles. If you asked me this question months ago, I would have said smash Russell Wilson, and then probably Daniel Jones as well. But in this case, I don't want anything to do with the Broncos offense. It is just horrendous against also a pretty tough opponent in the Chiefs. So give me Mike White in this one. Hope for passing volume against the Buffalo Bills. Hopefully Mike White can make it more of a shootout. And then Daniel Jones against the Eagles. Don't like any matchup against the Eagles, but Daniel Jones is able to be serviceable as a rushing quarterback as well. And yeah, just basically avoiding Russell Wilson if I can help it. So definitely going with Mike White and Daniel Jones in this one. But I appreciate the question. But I do understand you very much are feeling like you're in the twilight zone, as you mentioned on Twitter, and I would agree with you there. But I appreciate you asking. Best of luck. And we will go to at Chimichanga44. He asks Devin Singletary against the New York Jets or Michael Carter against the Buffalo Bills. So Michael Carter is slated to return back to the field this week against the Buffalo Bills. Don't love that matchup. I think he did pretty well against them the last time they faced each other. But in the last 2 weeks, Zonovan Bam Knight has really played extremely well, including getting work in the passing game, especially last week with 5 catches, I believe. So, if anything, it's going to be kind of an ugly split between Carter and Knight, and then you throw in Ty Johnson into the mix. It could just be kind of an ugly committee situation. Um, on the other side, Devin Singletary has been losing snaps to the rookie James Cook. So they both were at 44 and 45% snaps last week in prime time against the Patriots. So in this one, I will just stick with Devin Singletary. We know he's healthy. We basically have an idea of what his role will be. So I will just take this week as an opportunity to kind of just wait and see what happens with Michael Carter and his return to the field, especially with the factor of Zonovan Knight playing quite well over the last 2 weeks. So kind of wait and see on Carter. Kind of throw in Singletary just once again as a tight or as a, touchdown dependent RB2 to flex play. So that's the way I would go. So best of luck to you. Then at the D unit, 13, friend of the podcast, Dustin, from a few weeks back, he was on the show, but he asks Scott Fishbowl 12 settings. He clearly has advanced through the playoffs. So congratulations, Dustin. So there are special settings in that tournament. Scott Fishbowl, of course. He asks Mac Jones, and of course he's the quarterback for the Patriots going up against the Arizona Cardinals, or Brett Maurer, the kicker for the Cowboys going up against the Houston Texans. So the scoring settings for Scott Fishbowl are especially unique for quarterbacks. So you lose points or a certain percentage of points for incompletions. So basically, to keep the quarterback in the positive, you want to be right around 70% completion percentage. Then obviously, if it dips below that, you can make up for it obviously through rushing yardage and passing touchdowns, of course. Now, Mac Jones, I think that's a great question because Mac Jones is hovering right around 68% on the season, has not been necessarily lighting it up as far as scoring opportunities go. Although I think that this could be a sneaky high scoring game against the Cardinals where the Russian attack has been not efficient over the last couple of weeks, where they would be it would be beneficial to be throwing the ball more. Um, Now there is a lot more safety, I would say, potentially with the kicker against Houston. Um, it may be a game similar to last week where the Cowboys just may score a lot of touchdowns and not kick as many field goals. I think they should be able to move the ball well against the Texans. So I do think obviously you're going for ceiling because you're just trying to advance to the next round, score as many points as possible. When in doubt, I'm gonna be leaning on the quarterback there. So give me Mac Jones against the Cardinals. But great question. I appreciate the question, Dustin. So best of luck to you. And of course, we got our guy at Jamie underscore FF Addict 2. He has a 2-part question. He asks for 2 running backs and 1 flex spot, and then lists 3 wide receivers for the other flex spot. So if it's between these 2 running backs, Gus Edwards against the Steelers or Raheem Mostert against the Chargers, I will go with Raheem Mostert just because of the implied total of the scoring for the games, 51 and a half in that Dolphins Chargers game, and then only 37 points for the Ravens and the Steelers. Both of these, it's a great question because both of these running backs are splitting time in their backfields. Maybe a little bit more of a downgrade for Edwards since Lamar Jackson is going to be out this week. But give me Raheem Mostert between the two. And then, as far as the wide receivers go, he asks one of these three: Joshua Palmer, Tyler Boyd, and Donovan Peoples Jones. Donovan Peoples Jones going up against the Bengals, Tyler Boyd going up against the Browns in that same matchup. And then Joshua Palmer, of course, in that Sunday night game with the Dolphins, as alluded to earlier. So I'm going to go with Joshua Palmer here. Tyler Boyd was a pretty chalky answer for me in Jamar Chase's absence. I mean, he could still be serviceable, but his ceiling is a little bit more diminished now with Jamar Chase being back on the field. I was very encouraging to see Chase back in action last week. Then Donovan Peoples-Jones has been solid overall. This could actually be a nice opportunity for him to have a little bit more ceiling in what could be a very exciting, high-scoring game against the Bengals. So the real answer here is if you have to go with a running back and only one of these wide receivers, I would say Mostert and Palmer. But overall, if you could just do 2 wide receivers of these 5, I would take Palmer and Peoples Jones. So let me know on Twitter, Jamie, if that is going to be possible for you. But I would go Palmer overall for the wide receivers and Mostert for the running back. But if you could just do 2 of the wide receivers, Palmer and Peoples Jones. So best of luck. Keep killing it, my friend. And last question comes from at Gold Jacket QBs once again. Jim, I got to give a shout out to Jim. He did give me my first appearance on a podcast. So I'll never forget Jim and his generosity there, giving me that first shot. But he has a really good question here. He's basically just recognizing that week 14 is this bye apocalypse, right? 6 teams on bye, a lot of injuries piled up from the previous week. Most notably Kenneth Walker, the running back for the Seahawks, and as well as some other players around the league. But he's asking if there's a player that I'm focusing on adding in free agency or making trades for as the leagues are winding down and trade deadlines are coming up here. So I have one player in mind that does satisfy both. So it could be a free agency ad as well as a trade buy low candidate. So the player that satisfies both of those for me right now is DJ Chark of the Lions. He returned back to the field 2 weeks ago from an extended stay on IR. So the beauty about the Lions are that like their defense is just it's a real struggle fest for their defense. So they're going to be in these games where they're going to be having to put up a lot of points, push the ball down the field, push the ball down the field, and no one better at that than DJ Chark. So he was a player I was very excited for coming into the season. Then he got hurt early on. Um, so between Amon-Ra St. Brown, uh, taking the majority of the targets, there's really not a lot behind him. But I think DJ Chark is a great complementary piece to have a deeper targets downfield, but he can accomplish being added on your team through free agency most likely right now only rostered on in 41% of teams on sleeper, but also a buy low. You're not going to have to give a lot up to try to acquire him right now, just as a lottery ticket ad. So Jim, I would focus on DJ Chark. I think he could be sneaky good down the stretch. Um, Again, because the Lions will always be in this position where they have to put up points. And I think Chark could definitely contribute to that, as he has already the last 2 weeks. Uh, I think a 9.5 point outing 2 weeks ago, and then last week he had a 13 point outing. But the main player that I would think is the most feasible, the most realistic buy amongst like a typical starting option here is Isaiah Pacheco of the Chiefs, averaging 50% of snaps since for the last 5 weeks, I believe, and now that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is on IR, his snaps have not really jumped higher than an average of 50% over the last 4 or 5 weeks. So that is a selling point or a buying point. In this case, he's been extremely productive over that span with a phenomenal playoff schedule. So let me just pull this up real quick here. Who the Chiefs are playing. Um, yeah, so the Chiefs coming up here have Denver, Houston, Seattle, and then Denver again. Um, Yeah. So give me Pacheco if you're able to. He's had three straight RB2 or better weeks, and I think he could be a sneaky buy at this point, making a push for the playoffs. So love that question, and best of luck, Jim, and best of luck, everyone. Appreciate you all asking. Um, Anything I can do to help you guys out, just don't hesitate to reach out. So I appreciate that. So best of luck, everybody. All right, so we're going to go through the rest of the Week 14 slate here, starting with the early games and then the three later games, starting with the Philadelphia Eagles at the New York Giants, 45 over under in this one. No reason to not start all your Eagles. Start all your Eagles, meaning Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, and Miles Sanders. Um, Deeper leagues, you could always take a shot at Quez Watkins, but you're really are hoping for a touchdown there. We're talking deep leagues there. Um, deep leagues, maybe even Kenneth Gainwell. Not so sure about the tight ends until Dallas Goedert comes back. On the New York Giants side of the ball, of course, you can trust Saquon Barkley. I do think Daniel Jones is a borderline QB1, super flex play, especially with the bye weeks situation that we have here. I think Darius Slayton can be implemented as a flex play, but outside of that, there's really not much I want to be trusting as far as a Giants offensive skill position player. So that'll do it for the Eagles and Giants. We'll move on to the New York Jets at the Buffalo Bills. Over under, and this one is 44 points. The Jets, I think you can still roll with Mike White as a super flex play. Garrett Wilson, I think, is definitely a borderline trust if you must. And again, just because of the nature of the tight end position, I think Tyler Conklin could be a deeper league tight end play here. And then with the running back situation, really deep if you must. Michael Carter, I think he could be implemented if you really are desperate here, which is very possible. With the six teams on by, a lot of good running backs just are not going to be able to be used. Then, of course, Zonovan Knight, I think I would have a little bit more confidence in, but he would still come in as an if you must because they are playing the Bills after all. Don't necessarily love that unless they're just catching a ton of catches like Ramondre Stevenson did against them last week. On the Buffalo Bills side of the ball, it's pretty much business as usual there. Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs are your trustworthy ones. Devin Singletary is more of an if you must flex type of play. James Cook, I think, is kind of in the same boat, but maybe just a little bit less confidence just because he has been coming on as of late, but that could change. And there's a tough matchup against the Jets as well, a very good defense up to this point of the season. Dawson Knox is kind of in that Tyler Conklin range of tight end where it's like six teams on by. Um, you really want to bank on either passing volume or good quality at quarterback. So in this case, yeah, Josh Allen. If I'm catching passes from Josh Allen, you could do a lot worse, or it's hard to do worse than him. So Dawson Knox would basically come in as like a deeper league tight end play. As far as the wide receivers behind Stephon Diggs is just kind of a frustrating thing that like Gabriel Davis has just had like the roller coaster season as somewhat anticipated. So I think he could be an if you must option if you're aiming for that ceiling. Then like Isaiah McKenzie, he could have these like spike weeks as well. I would feel less confident throwing him into a starting lineup, but definitely Gabe Davis is always a tempting player, especially with the bye week situation that we have. Cleveland Browns at the Cincinnati Bengals, a nice AFC North division matchup here. A very exciting opportunity to see what the Browns can look like with Deshaun Watson back in a game where they will have to be pushing the ball down the field a little bit more than they had to against the Texans last week. So I think Deshaun Watson could be implemented as a super flex here. Nick Chubb, I'm trusting. Kareem Hunt is more of an if you must flex play as far as the running backs go. Then the pass catchers, still trusting Amari Cooper. I think Donovan Peoples Jones is more of an if you must deeper flex play. And David Njoku, of course, would be a trustworthy tight end as long as he is healthy. On the Cincinnati Bengals side of the ball, I'm starting all my healthy Bengals. So what I mean by that is Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, even Tyler Boyd. He would come in more as an if you must. Um, Hayden Hurst would typically be a recommended play, but he's looking to be doubtful at this point, so can't rely on him this week. That actually may be helpful for Tyler Boyd and just the general wide receivers there. But the real tricky situation with the Bengals right now is the running back. So Samaje Perine has been an absolute stud in Joe Mixon's absence as he's been trying to get through the concussion protocol. As of Wednesday, Joe Mixon did clear the concussion protocol. So he may be active, he may be even the starter. However, it really wouldn't shock me if they try to reintroduce him slowly into the offense just because P. Ryan has been just so productive. It wouldn't really make sense just completely go away with them, especially if the Bengals have like the playoffs on their mind to try to keep Joe Mixon a little bit more fresh. I think that could be just kind of an awkward for fantasy purposes split as far as the opportunities go, but I think you could implement both of them into a starting lineup. I can definitely see a world where that would make sense to do, but just kind of muddies the water a little bit for the fantasy expectations. So yeah, definitely excited about that game. That'll be a very interesting one to check out. Moving on to the two Texas teams going up against each other. Got the Houston Texans at the Dallas Cowboys. So fire up your Cowboys. I would anticipate maybe a little bit more of a floor game for Dak. I just think it's just going to be Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard just going nuts against the Texans. Still starting CD Lamb, of course. You're still starting Dalton Schultz, of course. I think Michael Gallup is more of a deeper league if you must, like a deeper flex option against the Texans. Then on the Texans side of the ball, Davis Mills is slated to start again after Kyle Allen got the start the last 2 or 3 weeks. Um, I'm not starting Davis Mills if I can help it. Even in super flex leagues, he would barely come in as an option. Um, Keep your eye on Nico Collins, the wide receiver for the Texans. He was questionable, at least on Wednesday, after having a pretty good game in Brandon Cooks' absence the week before. Keep speaking of that, keep your eye on Brandon Cooks as well. He was also questionable. Basically, I'm trying to avoid anyone on this Texans team, with the exception of Damian Pierce, who I think will come in as like a borderline bench, borderline if you must type. He basically gets like starter consideration just because of all of the running backs or that they're going to be out this week on bye. No Jonathan Taylor, no Alvin Kamara, no Brian Robinson or Antonio Gibson, no AJ Dillon, no Aaron Jones, no David Montgomery, no Cordero Patterson. So because of that, even though it's a really tough matchup against the Cowboys, I still think Damian Pierce does have a spot in the starting lineup, even though it could get ugly quickly here for the Texans. He would be the only Texan I would really feel comfortable getting in a starting lineup. with the exception of a healthy Brandon Cooks or a healthy Nico Collins in deeper leagues. Moving on to the Minnesota Vikings at the Detroit Lions, another game with a 51.5 points over under. Um, Basically, I want to start all the offensive players I can in this one. Kirk Cousins, of course, Justin Jefferson, of course, Dalvin Cook, of course, TJ Hawkinson, and Adam Thielen. I think there a world exists where you could even consider Alexander Madison in a really deep league. Again, if you're just suffering with like trying to find starters in a deeper league, I think you could do a lot worse than Madison against the Lions here. Then on the other side of the ball, I say trust all your Lions. Just um, Jared Cook, Jamal Williams, of course, DeAndre Swift, who's still playing part time but is still being very productive there. Amon-Ra St. Brown and DJ Chark in like a deeper league flex play. Very excited for this game, especially with the 51.5 point over under. I think that that'll be a lot of fun to watch. Got the Jacksonville Jaguars now at the Tennessee Titans, 41 point over under. So on the Jacksonville side, as long as Trevor Lawrence is healthy, he is a startable option here, as well as Travis Etienne, Christian Kirk. Um, the wide receivers behind Christian Kirk got to keep an eye on. I think Zay Jones is questionable right now, so even in like deeper leagues, he would be like an if you must type in that offense. Then Evan Ingram would come in as an if you must tight end. On the Tennessee Titans side of the ball, give me all the Derrick Henry. He would basically be the start of the week here in a nice bounce back game against struggling against the Eagles, against the Jaguars. So yeah, I think Derrick Henry is absolutely going to smash here. You can trust Ryan Tannehill as at least a super flex play, and then if Traylon Burks is if he's going to be able to play in this one, I think he could be implemented as an if you must flex play as well. Kind of avoiding the tight ends for now in Tennessee was encouraged by what I saw from Okwonu against the Eagles, and then Austin Hooper is just kind of in that same like Dawson Knox and Tyler Conklin tier. Could be solid, but then could just do absolutely nothing. So just kind of a frustrating one, but um, definitely that offense is going to be going completely through Derrick Henry, I would imagine. So fire him up against the Jaguars. Then we got the Baltimore Ravens at the Pittsburgh Steelers. So on the Baltimore side of the ball, one of the big injuries that I was sort of alluding to earlier, we had Kenneth Walker, Lamar Jackson, of course, on the Ravens, and like Jimmy Garoppolo. There's a couple big ones there, but the Ravens will be without Lamar Jackson. So Tyler Huntley will be starting in his place, and who actually has been pretty solid. He plays pretty similar to Lamar Jackson. So as long as he is getting those rushing attempts in, that's going to make his fantasy days. So I think he could be implemented as a super flex play here against the Steelers. Definitely avoiding the running backs if I can on the Ravens side. And then as far as the pass catchers go, Mark Andrews. After Mark Andrews, I really don't want to start any of these guys. Nothing really has been super sustainable from a fantasy asset side, but it really wouldn't have me shy away from Tyler Huntley just because of that rushing upside. Even though it seems counterintuitive and not a ton of weapons to work with, but he can make it work on the ground for sure. On the Steelers side of the ball, I think Kenny Pickett would come in as like a borderline super flex play. Najee Harris, as long as he's healthy, he may be questionable at this time, but if he is active for game day, hard to not get him in a lineup, even though certain expectations have to be managed at this point as he has been going through dealing with some injuries. The wide receivers and the pass catchers, I think you can absolutely trust Pat Fryermuth. Um, Deontay Johnson and George Pickens are more of if you must flex plays at this point, unfortunately, but still always tempting to get them into lineups for sure. And again, a lower implied total here for this game at 37, which is tied for the lowest on the week with another matchup that I'll mention here in just a moment. For the later slate, just got 3 games to cover here. I'll start with the low game as far as the points are considered or are concerned. Got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the San Francisco 49ers. That game over under is at 37 right now. So the Buccaneers had a pretty wild come from behind win against the Saints on Monday Night Football. Really, their running backs both ate. So Leonard Fournette and Rashad White. I said last week, even if Fournette is healthy, I still think you could trust Rashad White. Both I think that I think that sentiment would still hold true in this game against the 49ers, despite it being a tough matchup. Would still be fine starting both of them. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, I'm never not going to be starting them as long as they're healthy. And then Tom Brady would come in as a super flex play, borderline QB1. On the 49ers side of the ball, definitely a big blow to the offense, losing Jimmy Garoppolo here, likely for the season as he had a broken foot. You obviously are starting and trusting Christian McCaffrey and Debo Samuel as long as Debo is healthy. Brandon Ayuk, I think, is trustable, is startable for sure, but more of an if you must. Just with a backup quarterback, I believe it's going to be Brock Purdy, who actually threw 2 touchdowns in relief of Jimmy Garoppolo last week. Still a tough Buccaneers defense, so just kind of manage expectations there. Purdy would be like a desperation super flex play just because of the great weapons in that offense, of course, with George Kittle as well. Um, Still best to avoid just kind of a more of a wait and see opportunity there with Purdy. But the 49ers did sign Josh Johnson for what it's worth. He has had moments where he's been solid too, as well as a veteran. Continuing on with the later slate for Sunday, Kansas City Chiefs at the Denver Broncos. So, as I was saying earlier in one of the start sit questions, I'm just avoiding all the Broncos if I can help it. I think some of the players can be kind of like sneaky, like PPR options, like the tight end Greg Dulcich. I think he's kind of a sneaky, deeper tight end play. Cortland Sutton, as long as he's healthy, hard to not have him in your lineup. I do believe he is questionable right now, so that's just something to monitor, but may just be for the best to just go a different direction anyway. And then same goes for Jerry Judy. As long as he's healthy, he's hard to not get in a lineup. Then Russell Wilson at this point, he's hardly a super flex play. Just the offense is just not scoring touchdowns, and he's not really getting a lot of rushing yards, a lot like he was prone to do on occasion in Seattle. Just generally trying to distance myself from this offense, especially their running backs. Absolutely not against the Kansas City Chiefs. No way. Then on the Kansas City Chiefs side of the ball, you're firing up all your Chiefs. Um, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelsey, Isaiah Pacheco. I even think Jerick McKinnon could be implemented as like a deeper league flex play. As far as the wide receivers go, um, tough Denver Broncos defense and secondary, especially. But Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, I think you could still implement as flex plays, or in Marquez Valdes-Scantling's case, a deeper flex play. Keep your eye on Darius Toney. I know he's been inactive the last couple of weeks, but just something to monitor there if he is questionable or if he'll be ruled out. Um, if he's active, it's kind of hard to not want him in your lineup, but it may just make more sense just to kind of bench him in this week. First week back against the tough Broncos secondary, probably could go a different direction. And then to wrap up this week of matchups, we got the Carolina Panthers at the Seattle Seahawks. So a lot of moving parts here. The Seattle Seahawks will be without Kenneth Walker this week, most likely. Even if he is active, it's probably hard to think he's going to get a big workload. leaving the Seattle running back with either DJ Dallas, who is also questionable right now, Tony Jones, Travis Homer. Not really sure what that's going to look like. So find to speculate and add these guys onto your roster if you have a spot or if you have like an injury like a Jimmy Garoppolo to add, um, never a bad idea just to add these guys as like a speculative ad, but not ready to trust them into my lineup. However, the players I would feel comfortable trusting in my lineup would still be Geno Smith, would still be Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, especially against the Panthers with a 44 point over under. And then on the Carolina Panthers side of the ball, I got Sam Darnold as the starter, slated to be the starter once again. So after Sam Darnold, who is kind of a borderline super flex play, I would trust DJ Moore as a flex play, wide receiver, and then keep your eye on Donta Foreman's availability, as I mentioned in one of the listener start sit questions. He is currently questionable. If he is active and he is healthy, he's ready to go, then he is absolutely trustworthy, at least as a flex at worst option against the Seahawks. However, if he is out, you could feel pretty confident firing up Chuba Hubbard as a flex play in that one. So that's going to do it for week 14. Again, a pretty brutal week just with the 6 teams on bye, but should be a fun week of NFL action as always. So appreciate you watching. Thanks for checking it out. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel as well as the podcast network on Spotify or on Apple, just so you never miss this show or any of the other great content coming out on the IDP Guys network. So thank you for listening. Best of luck. Keep climbing.